Hello and welcome to episode 3 of our Buy or Beware concealer series. I am going to be talking about the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Away liquid concealer today. This concealer I picked up back in November, so I've had it for a while and been trying it for a while now. This was a very hyped up concealer. That's probably why I picked it up. I'm very excited that Charlotte Tilbury is now available at Sephora. Let's talk about this concealer a little bit. Like I said, it was very hyped up. It launched last fall and it was like all anyone was talking about in terms of concealer. This is actually supposed to be a full coverage concealer. It has so many different claims. If you ever watched any of the Charlotte Tilbury videos on YouTube or even maybe on her Instagram, the superlatives that Charlotte uses to describe her products are bar none. She is always so enthusiastic about her products and all the claims about the products. So one claim is that this is supposed to be full coverage. Another claim is that it is supposed to be light reflecting almost. It's supposed to diminish the darkness under your eyes. It also has a claim of smoothing fine lines. And I think it also said something about color correcting. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this concealer. It definitely has a lot of claims. This is the packaging. It comes in kind of that classic Charlotte Tilbury rose gold packaging. It has these like ridges on the top and bottom here. Now this is one of those concealers with a sponge tip applicator, which we will talk a little bit more about later. It's definitely reminiscent of the Maybelline concealer, Age Rewind concealer, which I currently do not have in front of me, but it's what I'm trying to use up in my project pan. So it's very similar to that, and you know, it's not my favorite packaging, I will admit. Now, out of all of the concealers that I'm trying this week, I believe this range has the least number of shades. So I believe there's only 16 shades in this line. So this is in the shade number 7, and I typically land in the number 7 range for Charlotte Tilbury. So there's about 9 shades that are deeper than this. So this is described as a golden sand for medium skin tones with neutral warm undertones, which is pretty much where I land. This concealer is also the priciest of the bunch that I'm going to try this week for the least amount of product. So this retails for $38 Canadian and you only get 4 milliliters of product. So before I share my thoughts and pros and cons about this product, let's go through the application and wear test. So I do already have my base on, so I'm using the Dior Backstage Face and Body Foundation, and I'm gonna go in with the concealer now. So we're using the Charlotte Tilbury Magic Away Concealer. And this concealer is, you know, I've used it several times and I don't want to spoil it, but I'm not really super impressed with it. So it does have that sponge tip applicator that's built in, kind of similar to the Maybelline Age Rewind. Thing about these sponge tips is you never really know how much product you're getting. So I always kind of do about 4 or 5 clicks. Hopefully that is enough product, and then I just kind of stamp it under the eye. The sponge is also so strange that I end up kind of just rolling it under the eyes because, like I said, I'm not quite sure where the product is coming from. Sometimes I feel like there isn't a lot of product that comes out. But let's start with that. I obviously don't use this sponge tip to blend in the product, so I'm just going to go in with my little Real Techniques sponge. So this is after one application, so it has definitely brightened under the eyes. It has pretty decent coverage also, and I don't feel like it's accentuating my fine lines. So I'm going to add a little bit more and then also do a little bit on the face. I look so weird right now. I think what's happening with this applicator is that the product obviously is coming from the bottom, but I think it's getting trapped kind of at the bottom of the sponge instead of kind of dispersing up and out. And that's why it all kind of just accumulates right where the sponge and the actual funnel ends. I obviously don't really know a lot of the technical words for these components, but anyway, we're just gonna blend this in with this sponge and see how it wears throughout the day. So this is the concealer blended out. I like the finish of it. I've worn this several times before, and it always applies really nicely. And despite the fact that I feel like I applied a lot, it really melds into the skin really nicely. So even though I do have quite a bit of concealer on my skin right now, it doesn't really look it, at least up close, because it's just blended into the skin really nicely. So I'm going to take some powder and just set the under eye. I'll do a half and half again. The concealer, as you can see, took down a bit of the redness on my forehead here, so that I'm pretty pleased about. So this is how the skin looks with the concealer and the powder. So overall, I think it's a really nice, smooth, even finish. It does take down the redness on my blemishes up on my forehead. So I will check back in a few hours to see how it wore throughout the day. Hello, so I'm using my phone to do this little check-in. I was gonna wait till the end of the night, but I wanted to show you guys just kind of how the concealer is creasing under the eyes and kind of making my fine lines look kind of worse. This occasionally happens when I wear this concealer. Sometimes if I apply maybe a little too much, this can happen, and I wanted to show it to you guys because it's really easy just to blend back in. So as you can see, all gone, but it can kind of crease a little bit under the eyes. So you just have to be a bit mindful of that. It's really easy to fix, but if you're not looking at your face constantly throughout the day, then that can happen. Okay, so it has been a little over 9 hours since we first applied the concealer. And aside from the little snippet that you saw earlier with the creasing, I don't really have anything new to report. The concealer still looks pretty good after kind of buffing it in earlier. That was around the, I think, like 3-hour mark, and it didn't really shift too much after that. I'll bring you guys in a bit closer and you can kind of see how it's sitting on my skin. I do feel like it is just kind of, I don't know, making my under eyes look a little crepey. So here is a beautifully zoomed image of my under eyes. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of creasing in like my fine lines here. Again, if you kind of buff it in, it kind of disappears. I don't feel like it's sitting really on top of the skin. It's just not sitting as nicely as some other concealers. It has worn a little bit kind of in the inner corner, pretty typical. It has been on for a little over 9 hours. I bought this concealer, I think in December, so I have been wearing this pretty regularly over the past 3 months, and I gotta say it's different every time. Some days the concealer really just sits on top of my skin and it doesn't look very flattering. Other days it blends really nicely, but I get that creasing. For me, it is just a bit of a finicky concealer to wear at times. Okay, let us round up all of my thoughts into the pros and cons with this concealer. So number one for the pro is that it's easy to blend. I didn't find that it was hard to blend. You know, you can blend it in with your fingers. I prefer using a sponge, but it's very easy. The formulation is really creamy. It's easy to blend. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a full coverage concealer right off the bat. It definitely feels like more of a medium to buildable full coverage, but again, it's easy to layer. The application lays well on top of each other and it still looks really nice and natural, almost like skin. It does brighten the under eyes, so I don't know if that's the color correcting aspect of the concealer, but I do feel like upon application it definitely brightens the darkness under my eyes. It's not great necessarily for spot concealing, but if you just want to kind of reduce the redness on your cheeks or any blemishes, it's great for that. And the last pro that I have is that it does last pretty well throughout the day with minimal creasing. Okay, let's talk about the cons, because this is a concealer that I might have more significant cons for than some of the other concealers that I've tried this week. So my number one con is this packaging. I really, really do not like this packaging. I love the idea of the sponge tip applicator. I like having everything kind of all in one, but it's so messy. The sponge applicator actually touches the inside of the lid, so the inside of this lid is disgusting. It also brings the product down onto the actual, I don't know, tube, and I'm not a huge fan of the packaging. Also, in my experience, the sponge gets saturated, and when it gets saturated, it tends to tear. That's happened to me with the Maybelline Age Rewind concealer, and I can see that happening with this because the product bunches up in the exact same area, kind of down here where the plastic ends and the sponge begins. And from my experience, that is where this tends to fall apart. Also with this packaging, I just feel like you waste a lot of product. You know, you get so much product in the sponge, and even though you put the lid on, some of this product will just tend to dry out, and you're just twisting more and more product up there, and it's just not my favorite. From my experience with this concealer, using it over the past almost 3 months, is that it's not great for swiping product on. You definitely get a little bit more product and more coverage and just ease of use if you actually dab it onto your skin as opposed to swiping. I also find that if you do swipe using the sponge tip applicator, that's when it has a more tendency to kind of tear and break off. The second con I have with this, as you guys saw in the wear test, is that it does tend to crease. And with the creasing, it happens pretty much right away, like within an hour or two of application. You can just blend it out really nicely and you're back to normal. It typically doesn't crease again after that. And I'm not a huge fan of that because, one, again, if you're not looking at yourself like constantly throughout the day, you might not notice that and you might not know to fix it. I just happened to notice it because I was looking at myself in the mirror. My last con about this product is that it's pretty pricey for the amount of product that you're getting. So you're paying $38 Canadian and you're only getting 4 milliliters of product. So it doesn't really seem like that big of a deal, especially when you can visually see the product that you're using up, which I think is actually a good thing because then you know when you've actually used up the product through this little window here. But knowing that you only get like this much product and you're paying for all this packaging and $38, it does not seem like a very great bang for your buck. Okay, so overall, the Magic Away Concealer from Charlotte Tilbury is a beware for me, for 3 main reasons. Number one, it does crease in the fine lines and settles a little bit, especially if you do more than 1 layer, which you will have to do if you want a more full coverage look. Number two, that sponge tip applicator is just not a win for me. I don't find it to be that useful. I find it to be a little unhygienic at times, and it does tend to tear easily. And also if you're swiping it onto your skin. And number three, the price for the amount of product that you're getting, I don't feel like you're getting a lot of value there. So I hope you found this review helpful. If you have tried the Magic Away Concealer, I would love to hear your experience with it, good or bad, similar or dissimilar. I'm sure it will be helpful to a lot of people who are trying to figure out whether this concealer is going to work from them. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you guys tomorrow for my next concealer review. It will actually be on the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Concealer, which just came out earlier this year. So thank you guys so much for watching. Tomorrow's video is going to be on the Makeup Forever Ultra HD Concealer. So if you want to learn more about this, then stay tuned tomorrow for that. And I will see you guys then. Bye.